Welcome to the demo video for Sprint 0 of the Searchworks Indexing and Searchworks Performance work cycle. I am Christina Harlow, and I'm acting product owner on this work cycle. To give you a little bit of introduction before we jump into showing what we did in our Sprint 0 this past week, I want to explain what the work cycle is about and give a list of the people involved. So, the Searchworks performance work cycle is primarily focused on trying to assess and improve what aspects of our indexing and Searchworks application performance blockers there are. We know that we could be returning results and generating our Solr index in a quicker and cleaner fashion, so we're trying to do that assessment and then act on what we find. The scope of this work cycle is not to try to change how indexing ends up being presented to the user, other than to make it faster, and to have where our developers can more readily spin up new indices or new additions to our indices in future work cycles. For this work cycle, we have quite a big team involved. So like I said, I'm Christina Harlow, and I'm the product owner for this project. We have Chris Beer involved, and he is the technical lead, as well as a software engineer. We have Jesse Keck, Camille Villa, Drew, what's your last name? Sorry.
Winjet,
thank you. Drew Winjet, Shelly Doljak. So I think I said all the software engineers on this project. We have Jack. Oh yes, and Jack Reed. Sorry, Jack. We have two consultant designers as part of trying to understand how we present some of this work back to users. This is Jennifer Vine and Gary, what's your last name?
Geisler,
sorry. Jennifer Vine and Gary Geisler are consultant designers on this. Stu Steinman is our direct liaison. Cam is our ops liaison and DevOps person, as well as Julian standing in for some particular questions. And then we have two key stakeholders involved in this work cycle. Alyssa and Sarah Seastone. So that's quite a large team. I would recommend, if you're interested in seeing what we're up to or the status of our work, showing on the screen right now is our project board. This might be a little in the weeds for some of our efforts, but it's a good place to get a feeling what we're working on and where the status of the work is. As well as we'll have a YouTube channel where we'll be sharing out these demo videos in the future. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to our tech lead, Chris, to go through some of what we went through in Sprint 0 for the past week.
Okay, so at the start of our Sprint 0, as is our tradition, we started with a round of dependency updates for the applications that we were going to be working on. We do this in order to make sure that we incorporate upstream changes readily and take advantage of things that have happened in the community since we last did this process. For Searchworks, that involved two major initiatives. One was to update to Blacklight 6.15 from Blacklight 6.10, representing a couple of years of work from the community, as well as updating our Rails version from 5.1 to 5.2. We also updated our Searchworks application to take advantage of testing against Solr 6.6, one of our stepping stones to our eventual target of testing against Solr 7. In doing so, we ran into a couple of potential blockers. One of them was a change that has been made in Solr that deprecates one of the critical functionalities we're using for our fielded search and Chinese, Japanese, and Korean languages. This is the Solr local parameters feature. There used to be a syntax where you could pass in different query fields and phrase fields as part of the query, and now it has to be done separately. Unfortunately, we've discovered that this functionality was introduced in Solar 5, and we are currently running Solar 4 in production. So we're going to have to consider ways of mitigating this problem as we look to deploy the application. Another project we worked on was the Searchworks index tests, which is our relevancy unit and integration test suite for our Solar results. We did several things here. First, we updated to use our new CI server. Because these tests are run against production data, they have to live on our inside our data center rather than running on Travis or Circle CI or some third-party hosted service. By updating to use Soul CI, we finally get these fancy little GitHub notifications and status reporting about the status of builds. We also did things like updating RSpec from a version several years out of date to a modern one. This gives us several nice things, including the ability to run only failing tests, which we're taking advantage of as we try to update the test suite in response to data changes that have occurred since the test suite was last successfully run. I'll show you an example of one of these tests. So here's what one of our relevancy tests looks like. We have a Solar query with a facet applied, the Stanford work facet, looking for doctoral dissertations. And one of the things we have to do is, as more dissertations are added to our Searchworks index, we gradually move the window higher and higher. This gives us some confidence in the relevancy we get back from Solar, and we hope this will really help guide us as we try to upgrade from Solar 4 to Solar 7. I think that was my bit, right?
Great, yeah, that sounds right. So now we're going to turn it over to Jack. Jack, are you ready?
Yep, I'm about to share my screen.
Cool.
Okay, so over the past week, Chris mentioned we did some software updates. One of the things that we were able to do was the team was able to get up to speed on the current Searchworks mark indexing code. Because we wanted to understand performance differences between our current Searchworks Solar instance and indexing into our Solar Cloud instance, we were able to run a full reindex of all of our mark records into Solar, which is running a more updated version of Solar 6, than the current Searchworks Solar. So we kicked off that first reindex on July 19th at 8:54 a.m. And throughout that indexing process, took notes and data points about the things that we saw in regards to performance of indexing, and also any potential problems with the systems that were involved, and the rate of indexing. So that those data points produced some charts for us to kind of look at number of documents being indexed per minute, and we were able to look at that indexing rate over time. Another interesting point that we were able to do is start to look at the actual indexing processes that indexed individual aggregated mark files. And through analysis of this data, we were able to determine that the indexing scripts that kicked off these indexing processes were only running about half the rate that they could. So this actually first run in logging a baseline of indexing performance to our Solar Cloud instance enabled us to find some performance wins that we're hoping will increase the throughput of indexing rate twice. So it's a double speed gain, which is really exciting to see in Sprint Zero. That's really all we have to talk about to begin with kind of our first baseline metrics for the indexing performance. The team has also gathered some additional baseline data around application performance, systems performance, queries that are being used, and like end user experience performance.
Great, thank you, Jack. Is there?
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, do you want to add the test review? Yes. Okay.
So one other thing, after Jack was able to index our MARC records into Solar, we were able to point our Searchworks index tests against that index and discovered we had a few regressions clustered in about 4 areas, and we expect the team will dig into those in the coming weeks.
But 90% relevancy tests passed.
So we're at a firm B+, A-.
Yep.
All right, great. Thank you, Jack and Chris. Now, Cam, do you want to give a few comments about the server migrations?
Sure. The team came up with a list of Searchworks-related servers, and all of them right now reside in the older VMware farm, which is in the Foresight data center. And during various tests before this, we've noticed that servers that run on a different environment in our newer VMware setup in a different data center seems to perform better. There's a couple of things going on there where we saw some data drops when we go from the Foresight, which is the old VM farm, but we didn't see those data drops when it ran on the NDCCH data center. NDCCH stands for Northwest Data Center and Communication Hub. It's a different location, it's seismically better, and it's a newer farm. So we're in process of migrating 30 some odd hosts over to see if performance of any of these will improve. So that's why we're about halfway through that list right now.
Thank you very much, Cam. Okay, now I'm going to hand it off to Alyssa to talk about some of the user questions that we have gathered.
Sure.
Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to just show this?
I sent you a doc, and you can share that.
I'll do that.
And I'll talk about it in a
There
second.
it is. Okay.
We started this week on some initial analysis on the types of questions users are asking about Searchworks, specifically Searchworks performance. We started with some data gathering from past Searchworks feedback submissions, and we also reached out to some of our public-facing staff to see what kinds of questions they need answers to and how they might like to discover that information. And then in addition to that, Drew began some initial design ideas, and that's the document being displayed right now. Drew, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. So if we look at that issue there are a couple of people who commented from different user perspectives on some of the questions that they had and how they might like those questions to be presented. So I've read through that, and there seem to be 3 basic perspectives that we need to speak to. One of them being the general public who's using Searchworks. So this could be faculty or students, researchers, members of the public who feel like things are slow or they're getting bad pages and they want some kind of explanation. So these are the kind of basic questions that they ask. And they need somewhat less detail than these other 2 users. They mostly need to know, should they report it or not. If we go to public-facing staff, they need to know more about the cause and degree of outage, and if possible, how it compares with historical performance to know if there's really a problem or if there's a known event. So in addition to seeing some kind of timeline of performance and how current performance compares with that, they also need some kind of like explicit identification of an event, a recognized event that's been reported on that timeline. And then for DLSS internal users, people who actually are participating in the indexing process or who need to debug things going wrong in the process, it would be useful for them to be able to see at what point in the established pipeline delays are occurring. And so being able to log events and display them in some way that show where these slowdowns happen in the process would be useful. If we scroll down, there's not a whole lot here, but just, let's see, is this an up-to-date, is there a page break there or something?
Oh yeah, there we go.
So these are just some basic ideas of the different views that might speak to the number of questions that we have. Just starting from the bottom there, to have a page to link to for a specific known performance event was identified in that ticket, and some things that Jennifer posted about that it's useful to be able to point to a specific thing so that we can communicate that we know that there's a problem and we have a name for that problem, and people can see where what the status of that specific problem is. Above that, the simple status page with history, a service status page. The idea there is basically that for each of the services in our pipeline, we just have a sort of on-off or, slow, fast, good, bad status, so people can get a quick overview. The event feed is something that'll be useful for a deeper view on known issues that we're working on or have worked on, or that can be alerted based on status on different boxes. And then the different time, scrolling up a bit more to the next page up, the ability to show a timeline addresses a lot of these questions. So this is, if we just open that link, this is just an example of a standard deployment performance timeline that can just be run with some JSON. If we can build an event feed, then we can show this on a page and show both our communicate or our historical performance, current performance, how unusual it is, and any known events on that timeline for our users. The last part of this document, if you go back to the document, scroll down a bunch, is an attempt to begin collecting sort of collecting how we are going to push data into a single backend of some kind to create, to be able to store the history of these things and present them to users. So these are just some of the known sources that we're working with, and there's more detail in what others have been working on in the metrics document there about how specifically we get data for each of these endpoints. So some of them you're actually able to ping a URL and get useful data out of them. Others will need to somehow download logs, and then some of them just send emails, and we may need to catch those emails and aggregate them.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, this is awesome. All right, let me pop back over to here. So now, Chris, do you want to screen share again for New Relic? Okay, so let me stop.
So leading up to this Searchworks indexing performance sprint, we started monitoring all of our relevant applications in New Relic. What New Relic does for us is it gives us a breakdown of performance. Currently we have 24 hours of data. We'll be extending that to 90 days in the coming weeks. What we can see from these graphs is about a third of our performance, Searchworks application performance, is spent waiting for Solar. So we know that, well, we hope there's an opportunity for improvement by improving search speed from Solar. Looking over at the Searchworks Solar graph, we get some idea about throughput and current timing, which we hope will be useful when we look to moving it into our Solar cloud cluster. One key thing to notice is our average throughput in Searchworks Solar is about 1,000 requests a minute, and that matches our current Solar average. So we're expecting to send twice as much traffic to this new cluster, and we'll be keeping an eye on these performance metrics as we proceed through this work cycle. One other thing I want to mention is the team spent time working on documentation for some of our components. And this has allowed the whole team to come up to speed on some of these different packages of software, including learning about particular version dependencies our applications have.
And special thanks to Shelley for walking the team through a number of these processes so that we can all be on the same page. Okay, so that is a wrap for our Sprint 0 demo video. We will be releasing this video plus some written up notes of what we just went through to the Searchworks Notify email list as well as to DLSS all. So if you're in those spaces, you can figure out what's going on and be kept up to date. You can also find myself or Chris, our tech lead, or any of the team members on Slack if you have particular questions, or follow our GitHub projects board for what we're working on. Thank you very much.